Shravanam Diaries podcast.
Hare Krishna, we are continuing to read Bhagavad Gita as it is, the book by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanaravinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Chapter 15, Yoga of the Supreme Person, Text 16. Dvavimau purushau loke, ksharascha kshara evacha, ksharah sarvani bhutani kutasto kshara uchyate. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So if you fall down, that's because you're fallible. That's why you're in the material world. There's nothing surprising at all. And sometimes we get very upset because we think that as soon as we become situated or we step on the path of bhakti yoga and the step of spiritual life, we are supposed to become immediately infallible. And we're like, where is the infallibleness? Let's read. What does it really mean? Purport. As already explained, the Lord in his incarnation as Vyasadeva compiled the Vedanta Sutra. Here the Lord is giving, in summary, the contents of the Vedanta Sutra. He says that the living entities, who are innumerable, can be divided into two classes, the fallible and the infallible. The living entities are eternally separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When they are in contact with the material world, they're called Jiva Bhuta. And the Sanskrit words given here, Ksharah Sarvani Bhutani, mean that they are fallible. Those who are in oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, are called infallible. Oneness does not mean that they have no individuality, but that there is no disunity. They are all agreeable to the purpose of the creation. Of course, in the spiritual world, there is no such thing as creation, but since the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, is the source of all emanations, that conception is explained. According to the statement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, there are two classes of living entities. The Vedas give evidence of this, so there is no doubt about it. The living entities who are struggling in this world with the mind and the five senses have their material bodies, which are changing. As long as a living entity is conditioned, his body changes due to contact with matter. Matter is changing, so the living entity appears to be changing. But in the spiritual world, the body is not made of matter. Therefore, there is no change. In the material world, the living entity undergoes 6 changes: birth, growth, duration, reproduction, then dwindling and vanishing. These are the stages of the material body. But in the spiritual world, the body does not change. There's no old age, there's no birth, there's no death. There, all exists in oneness. Ksharah Sarvani Bhutani. Any living entity who has come in contact with matter, beginning from the first created being, Brahma, down to a small ant, is changing its body, therefore they are fallible. In the spiritual world, however, they're always liberated in oneness. Text 17. Uttama purushastvanya paramatmetyudahrita yoloka trayama vishya bibhartya vyaya ishvara. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Lord, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Purport. The idea of this verse is very nicely expressed in the Katha Upanishad 2.2.13 and Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.13. It is clearly stated there that above the innumerable living entities, some of whom are conditioned and some of whom are liberated, there is the Supreme Personality who is Paramatma. The Upanishadic verse runs as follows: Nitya Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. The purport is that amongst all the living entities, both conditioned and liberated, there is one Supreme Living Personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who maintains them and gives them all the facility of enjoyment according to different work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. A wise man who can understand Him is eligible to attain perfect peace, not others. Text 18. Yasmat ksharam matitoham aksharadepi chottama atosmi loke vedicha prathitah purushottama. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person. Purport. No one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, neither the conditioned soul nor the liberated soul. He is therefore the greatest of personalities. Okay. Now, it is clear here that the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are individuals. The difference is that the living entities, either in the conditioned state or in the liberated state, cannot surpass in quantity the inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is incorrect to think of the Supreme Lord and the living entities as being on the same level or equal in all respects. There's always the question of superiority and inferiority between their personalities. The word Uttama is very significant. No one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Loke signifies, quote, in the Paurusha Agama, the Smriti scriptures, unquote. As confirmed in the Nirukti dictionary, Lokyate Vedartho Neina, quote, the purpose of the Vedas is explained by the Smriti scriptures, unquote. The Supreme Lord in his localized aspect of Paramatma is also described in the Vedas themselves. The following verse appears in the Vedas, Chandogya Upanishad 8.12.3. Tavadesha samprasado smacharitat samudhaya param jyoti rupam sampadya Svenarupena bhinishpadyate sa uttamah purushaha. Quote, the supersoul coming out of the body enters the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Then, in his form, he remains in his spiritual identity. That Supreme is called the Supreme Personality, unquote. This means that the Supreme Personality is exhibiting and diffusing his spiritual effulgence, which is the ultimate illumination. That Supreme Personality also has a localized aspect as Paramatma. By incarnating himself as the son of Satyavati and Parashara, he explains the Vedic knowledge as Vyasadeva. Jai. So, should we? No, we'll stop here for today. Okay, one thing I'll add regarding Fallible and Infallible and the Lord's personality and how they are situated in unity, right? They're unified. I remembered in one morning walk, Srila Prabhupada, he was saying that, he was making the point that just like putting the iron rod into the fire, iron starts acting like fire. And I remember clearly Prabhupada's voice, how he was saying that, you can tell me that, no, this is iron, but it's red hot, it's fire. Like he was like saying that. So similarly, like this body of ours, it's going through all of these changes, and changes are inevitable because we are in this, trapped in this material body. There will be changes, there will be, like we're coming here right after the previous topic of the three modes, all of these interactions, the body will grow, some changes will be there, it will dwindle eventually, and it will vanish. The spirit soul becomes infallible when you put this material machine into the fire of devotional service, and then it starts acting like spiritual, it starts acting infallible, it starts manifesting these spiritual qualities. And many times Srila Prabhupada mentioned that everything becomes spiritualized even while we are in the material world. So this, I just wanted to mention that. And of course, the Supreme Lord's position above everything is wonderfully explained here. Okay, yeah, tomorrow we'll be concluding this chapter, so yeah, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The book links, previous episodes timeline, and biography of the author can be found on shravanamdiaries.com. The link is in the description, and we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Hare